All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Movie Commentary Podcast. It's the podcast in which we watch movies and talk about movies. And today, we got ourselves another installment of horrific Halloween season for you. It's October, it is the month of horror movies, so we are continuing that trend by watching what a lot of people consider the kind of the origin or the kind of ground zero, per se, of the modern day zombie movie. Of course, zombies have basically infected, no pun intended there, every aspect of our pop culture for basically. I mean, you got movies like 28 Days Later, World War Z, and people might think, the movie Quarantine, not a basis on what's going on in the world right now, but a movie that's essentially just had like, flesh-eating zombies there. But one would say that it all started with this film, and this is I am, of course, talking to about 1968's Night of the Living Dead, directed by George A. Romero, starring Dwayne Jones, Judith O'Dea, Carl Hardman, and a whole bunch of other people that I'll actually get into that. Now, this is a very interesting episode, mainly for the fact that, and this is especially good for my people that like to listen to it on YouTube, I will actually be uploading the entire movie of Night of the Living Dead on YouTube for you guys to watch with this commentary. If you're watching the video on YouTube right now, I'm currently looking at the title card that I always put on there with it, but and very soon it will actually fade into the actual movie. So. And I will get it, and that actually kind of goes into a little bit of the history that I actually get into real shortly after I start the movie. So without further ado, let us start the movie. So the movie starts off with just kind of starting off with just like a little scene in the countryside, an Image 10 production that we just saw there. This little car kind of tootling in the road there. So. The reason, so a lot of people might be asking, why are you allowed to put this entire movie onto YouTube, or, why aren't there copyright laws for that? The reason is this title card coming up right as this car kind of turns the bend here, kind of right here. So it's Night of the Living Dead, the title card. You notice that there's no copyright notice on the bottom of that title card. Now a lot of people might be thinking, well, what gives? I mean, you put a lot of people put like copyright notices at the end of their movies instead of at the beginning there. Well, they didn't do that with this film. They didn't kind of have the wherewithal to do that, and then there was also a bit of a mix-up. So when they were trying to come up with when they were trying to come up with the title of Night of the Living Dead. Or they originally had a couple titles that they were looking at. They originally were thinking of George Romero originally wanted to do a movie called Night of Anubis, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek title. Anubis is actually, I think, I think it's like an Egyptian god of mummification. I may have gotten that completely wrong, but that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, and not a whole lot of people would have known that. But another thing, but basically, so George Romero decided, I'm not really going to do that title. I'm not going to do that title because it's just nobody would understand what it is. And then he decided that he wanted to do a title called Night of the Flesh Eaters. And originally that was the title that he went with, and they actually created a title card scene that they made with all that. Of Night of the Flesh Eaters, and I'm talking here now as they're pulling up to the cemetery, and they're about to lay, I think, a wreath for their mother, I think their deceased father, actually. But essentially, what ended up happening when they made the original Night of the Flesh Eaters title card, they actually put the copyright notice on the bottom there. But they found out that Night of the Flesh Eaters, it was actually already taken for a film that had been made already, so they couldn't use that title that they wanted to. So what they had to do was they had to come up with another title. And actually, from what I think I've read and heard, Night of the Living Dead was not made up by George Romero. I think that was made up by I think it was made mostly by the distributing company, the Walter Reed organization. I could be wrong on that, but again, Night of the Living Dead was not George Romero's idea. But when they made the new title card with Night of the Living Dead, they didn't put the copyright notice on the bottom of that card there, which had been there for the Night of the Flesh Eaters title card. And because that title card, that copyright notice wasn't there when they first showed this movie effectively fell into the public domain. It kind of cited a bit of a obscure law. It's not obscure because United States copyright laws are, especially for people putting things on YouTube. I mean, it's very very strict, very kind of stringent laws that people have been trying to kind of work their ways around, and people kind of find them a little But because this movie didn't have a copyright notice when they first showed the movie, that meant that the movie fell into the public domain. So basically, and this movie was released in 1968, and this law has actually since been updated. So if you actually did show something without the copyright notice, which literally is all just the C with the circle around it, copyright, blah, 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 1968 by this company, Image 10 Productions. But basically what the law says is that if you didn't put that little copyright notice there, it wouldn't be protected by copyright laws. And essentially the film fell into the public domain, and that's still copyright laws, copyright stuff that they're trying to fight nowadays, So yeah. So that's why I'm actually allowed to show you the whole film. Show you the whole film on YouTube here. In fact, I mean, you can the film that I'm showing you right now, not the version I would actually normally watch. I mean, it's not like it's anything different or anything like that. It's just like I actually own a Criterion Blu-ray. I actually owned a Criterion Blu-ray of Night of the Living Dead, and it actually is a lot better quality than this one that we're watching here. And of course, it costs some money, but I mean, of course, you can actually, because it's in the public domain, you can put this movie onto YouTube. I mean, you can upload this movie, download this movie for free online. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, no, that's enough about the public domain, thing. Of course, that's really kind of front loading this episode already. Especially for, of course, the people that are actually watching the film on YouTube here. He's, they're watching. Of course, they're Barbara. We're listening to the brother and sisters, Barbara and Johnny. Johnny played by I think Russell Streiner, who is actually one of the producers of this film. That's actually one of the kind of funny aspects of the behind the scenes of this movie. This movie is obviously if you're watching this, it's definitely looks low budget, and you're definitely thinking, oh my goodness, I mean, this movie has no production value at all and that kind of thing. So it's like, and basically what that meant is that a lot of the actors and actresses that actually played parts were also producers of the film. I mean, Russell Streiner was one of the producers of the film, not a actor by trade. I think he was just it was just cheaper for him. Oh, and here now we see what we see is the first ghoul. They're not zombies. This film never uses the word zombies, but what we are looking at is basically in a term what is called a ghoul. What they're going to be called. That's what they're called in the script, and also George Romero. Essentially, I think they also call them like those things, but essentially, so this zombie, or no, not a zombie at the time, but he's played by I think a man named Bill Heinzman. As you can see that he just kind of clocked Johnny's head against the grave, against the tombstone, and basically, in effect, killed him. And I believe that Bill Heinzman, he actually was on the set kind of last second there. He didn't. I think somebody else was supposed to play the zombie. Again, one of the producers, I believe, was going to play that zombie, and they had actually gotten that. Apparently, according to the producer. Or that person that was on because a lot of the people that are playing roles in this film are actually like members of the crew. And what ended up happening was that person essentially was in basically what he said zombie makeup all day, and he was basically filming the making the movie in basically that zombie makeup. So that's kind of funny. Now, this car that Barbara has kind of barricaded herself in, it's actually kind of it's a bit of an interesting kind of, part of the film history, is because this car is it didn't belong to the production. I believe it belonged to one of the production like assistants, like moms or something like that. But one of the things about this car was, and you're not seeing it here because you'll see it in just a second here, but the car is actually is essentially it had been in a wreck, like I think a few days before they had actually shot the film. And what ended up happening is that the I think it was like I think it's the left side of the car was dented, and you can see it here. It was dented, and they actually put in that little scene of the tree in order to get the car actually fully dented like that. So, again, it's kind of a bit of an interesting history of the film there. Of course, the impact didn't really look very, that bad, but of course, it's movies, so. So Barbara, played by Judith O'Day. And again, none of these actors were, well known at the time. I mean, it was basically, friends of, the production crew, that would essentially make the film. That would make the film. Of course, she was an actress. She was an actress, kind of living in and around Pittsburgh. Essentially, when she, I think, got on to Night of the Living Dead. Of course, Night of the Living Dead was made in and around the Pennsylvania area. You're seeing we're obviously out in the rural parts. I think these rural parts were actually, and there was a sign in the beginning of the film. What was the? I'm looking it up. Evans City. It was in Evans City, Pennsylvania. It's 30 miles north of Pittsburgh, in rural Butler County, and of course we obviously saw that. The Evans City. We obviously saw the actual Evans City Cemetery, which they filmed that opening shot from, which nowadays has become a horror staple for horror movie fans. And then this house that they just got into it was an actual farmhouse that was on that originally was scheduled to be demolished, and essentially what ended up happening was that the production crew came in and they were essentially just asked, hey, can we use this house? I mean, we're basically going to wreck it anyway, so I mean, it's going to be wrecked anyway, so and they were given free access to basically do whatever they wanted with this house. So I mean, it was a bit of a cool little good incentive for them as well. So it was kind of yeah. I also do believe that the music used in this film is also all in the public domain as well. I mean, Of course, this movie was made back 50 years ago, made in 1968. So again, it might be, not exactly sure now, but back in the day, I mean, this movie, they didn't score this movie. It was basically all in public domain kind of stuff. And she just gets kind of scared by the animals kind of mounted on the walls there. I think actually there was one of the production assistants on the film was actually a part-time taxidermist, so I think he actually helped them with mounting those heads on the movie screen there. So, one of the interesting things about this house is that the production crew, they actually had to stay in this house. There were some people that they actually would stay in this house and they would live there for some times. And the problem with that is that this house didn't have any running water. Again, this house was scheduled to be demolished, so there was no running water at the time. And basically, I think what happened was that people would they would have to boil water in order to get it to be clean, and they would have to bathe by dousing themselves in water, that kind of thing. So. Now you're seeing some other of those things kind of starting to walk up. Now the makeup here, I do believe it was a kind of a mix of like mortician's wax and some other kind of factors. Of course, with it being black and white, you can't really tell. You know what I mean? You can kind of tell there's a little kind of makeup and something on them, but with it being black and white, you can't really tell very well. Oh, that little skull with the eyeball in it. I think that skull was actually made by George Romero, and I think the eyeballs are actually ping pong balls that are like painted like eyeballs. So, truck driver, and we are introduced to Ben, played by Dwayne Jones. I don't know if he was a local actor. He actually more well known as a theater actor, and he actually he was actually a professor of drama and theater. I believe at New York University. I do believe. I'm not sure, but as you can tell, for people that are watching this, and for people that can't watch this, Ben in this film, played by Dwayne Jones. Dwayne Jones is actually an African American man. Now, of course, people that are watching this film and people that have watched this film before, people that know a lot about this film, they know all about they know about Dwayne Jones and him being African American. Some people that are maybe listening to this, audio only, you might not know that very well, but Dwayne Jones is but the casting of Dwayne Jones was at the time a bit of a it was a big deal because of course it was an African American man. I think it was one of the first instances of a movie. I think some people might say it was the very first instance of a film of an African American man being the hero of the film and basically being like the main character of the film. But George Romero, he has actually stated a lot of times that it wasn't really like they didn't think of it as a big deal when they casted Dwayne Jones because according to George Romero, Dwayne Jones was brought to them by basically like mutual friends. Like they were introduced and, like a friend bought like, hey, this actor Dwayne Jones is really good and, you probably should take a look at him for your film there. And essentially George Romero thought that Dwayne Jones had the best audition. So, that's who he went with, and George Romero at the time he's changed his stance on this in interviews. George Romero has actually since passed away. He's been he's been gone for about 5 years now, but at the time he didn't really think it was that big a deal to have an African American. I think one of the things that he said was like he was gonna be kind of cool and trendy without showing, without really like changing any of like the dialogue or making a big deal about having an African American man in the film. Of course, when he looked back on it, he was thinking we really should have kind of like made it a more bigger deal, and he should have kind of played it up a little bit more. Of course, also that caused some controversy because you kind of see him in this scene, in that scene there, and kind of in some of the later scenes, like he's kind of, especially with Judith O'Day, you kind of see him kind of getting a little, not roughhouse with her, but of course, like, sometimes in movies you have that thing where you kind of like, someone's kind of going insane, going crazy, and you basically go slap them kind of silly, that kind of thing. So, and of course, back being in the 60s, and of course, that probably caused a lot of, controversy, black man hitting a white woman like that. So, of course, we didn't see that right now, but I believe it's coming up here later in the film. So yeah. Now, the role of Ben was actually not written. Basically, it was originally, I believe, George Romero says that I've heard some conflicting reports on this, I've read some conflicting things, but George Romero has stated that Ben originally was supposed to be like a white truck driver. He was supposed to be like kind of a white truck driver, kind of rough around the edges and not really, that nice. Apparently, he was supposed to be kind of a D-bag when the original character there. Um, but Dwayne Jones came in and he essentially reworked the character also now going sorry, I kind of skipped over it. Going back to the heard different conflicting reports is I've heard that he was supposed to be like a white truck driver, but I also heard that George Romero wrote the character essentially colorless. He basically put anybody there. And then finally, when they cast Dwayne Jones as the lead actor, they were, Dwayne Jones, that really wasn't kind of in his character, and he didn't really like playing, a character like that. So basically what he wanted to do was he kind of wanted to make the character a little bit more kind of cerebral in a sense and make him a little bit more intellectual and more resourceful and, not as, rough around the edges as, say, the original script would have called for. So, Dwayne Jones, I mean, he's a very, very kind of intellectual man. I mean, he was obviously he was a professor. He was, apparently when he was making this film, he was doing a lot of reading and, so yeah, I mean, he was a very cultured, individual. So he didn't really like the idea of being rough around the edges. So they kind of, in a sense, basically changed the film role there. And, I'm pretty sure he was, Dwayne Jones never really kind of talked a lot about, he never really talked a lot about this film. I mean, it was always just kind of like a film that he had made, and he never really would bask in the gloriness that some people would try to bask in, because I mean, of course, when this film came out, I mean, it was one of the most horrifying movies that people had ever seen, and of course, I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, people would obviously say this is it's the birth of the modern zombie film. So, yeah. Fortunately, Dwayne Jones has been passed away for a little over 30 years now, so he's no longer with us. It's really interesting. You can see Judith O'Day. She's kind of very... You can see she's basically gone catatonic, She's essentially been very... silent, not really saying a whole lot, and I think some people have actually some people have actually kind of I think criticized this performance, actually, or maybe criticized the portrayal there, and because he essentially turns into just like a lump on a log, essentially, in the film here. She just basically kind of goes into that, like, catatonic, just scared, and she's just not talking, essentially, for the rest of the film there. So it's just, so, yeah. You can see kind of like Dwayne Jones, maybe the gentleness that he kind of exudes from being Ben, and kind of the because in that scene that we just watched here, I mean, he was very it was very much you need to, I mean, I need your help here, he was getting, you could tell that he was getting frustrated, and the character was getting frustrated, but he was like, getting frustrated is not really going to help us now, I need you to, we need to help each other out, we need to be calm and cool and collected in this, I know we're all scared, so it's just kind of something there. So, ooh, interesting cinematography here. Essentially, they just showed that little like moviola thing, like kind of like that, like I think it was like a little moviola thing or something like that. So, I don't know if this film invented the idea of boarding places up. Of course, I think it may be one of the I feel like it might be one of the earliest instances of that. But of course, I don't of course, that's a trope in a lot of movies now, and a lot of like kind of cartoons, especially like parodied in a lot of cartoons now. It's essentially like the idea that you're basically gonna like board. Basically, you're in a place, you're gonna find some wood and basically board it up so that nobody else can come inside and attack you and that kind of thing. So. Of course, she also finds some kind of putrid wood there. So, but of course, who am I to say? I don't know anything about wood and woodworking and that kind of thing. So you also might notice that this film is filmed in black and white, and that actually is again kind of due to the budget of the film. Of course, the budget of the film, again, is really low, a very low budget film. I mean, I do believe the final budget that they made on this film that they came out to was approximately, I think, $114,000, which is quite literally making a film for pennies, honestly. I mean, I feel like that's about as low. I feel like that's about as low as you could possibly go on making a film there. I mean, for instance, like Halloween is the film Halloween, made in 1978 by John Carpenter. That film is considered very low budget by a lot of people, and that film was made for $325,000, about 3 times the budget of this film. So, again, you look at it and it's just, how can you make a movie that low? And of course, that's just kind of something that was, something that was, saved and like a lot of film aspects went into that, including the choice of color and the choice to go black and white, because when they first started out on the budget there, when they first started filming, the only kind of film stock, of course, made in 1968. I mean, they made it on film, not like kind of celluloid film, not digital like we do nowadays. But they made what was I going to say? But when they were making this film, the only kind of film that George Romero really could afford was 35 millimeter black and white film. And I do believe there was at one point in the production when they were going along that they actually they somewhat decided, or no, they had a decision to make, because they actually had gotten enough money to make or to get color film. However, the film would actually be in 16 millimeter instead of 35 millimeter. So they actually had to, and they actually ended up sticking with the black and white, even though they could have gone to color, because basically what they would have had to do is reshoot all the scenes in color, or basically do like some kind of really expensive colorization process in order to get the film, colorized. Of course, now, I mean, if you go on YouTube, I mean, you can actually find colorized versions of Night of the Living Dead. Of course, I mean that's colorized after the fact. I mean, this I'm showing you in the original black and white version, obviously, that we're watching here. And of course, being a night film, especially, I mean, Night of the Living Dead being a night film and being in black and white, I think that definitely helps it out, because of the night scene makes it already a dark setting as it is, and making it black and white and the lack of color just really. I think it just adds to the spookiness and kind of the terrifyingness of it all. So, yeah. And also the idea, and apparently, and I mean, of course, this is also more of kind of like for you, like film junkies, you film nerds out there. But I mean, the idea that a lot of what I've read, the process of filming, or the idea to film in 35 millimeter actually kind of added to like what they call like the grittiness, and they made it kind of like documentary kind of style of a film. And a lot of people say that that's kind of what added to the kind of the lore of Night of the Living Dead, and what really made it kind of that as successful, which I admit, I mean, I think I mean, I like it being in black and white. I mean, I'm a fan of black and white films. Of course, I know that's kind of a bit of a bygone era, the black and white film. So, Apparently, so Judith O'Day is going over basically her predicament with Johnny and how, we were in the cemetery and we got attacked by those things and blah and wine and I shouldn't be doing that, but according to Judith O'Day, a lot of this entire monologue here was essentially improvised on set there. I think one of the things that was going on during the filming, of course, I mean, being at low budget, and I think they really were. I think a lot of the film, in fact, was actually improvised. Let me take a look here. I'm looking up some things on Wikipedia here, just kind of to. Oh, darn it. But no, anyway, it's just a lot of improvisation, all that kind of stuff, and and then also Barbara's kind of going over the whole story, of basically recapping the first part of the movie for us here. So, if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm currently while filming. While doing this, I mean, I'm watching the film with the volume on, but I'm probably gonna maybe mute the film while watching this. So if you're watching this film and you don't really hear anything, and you actually don't hear, oh my goodness, yeah, she's just screaming about the whole thing, and Dwayne Jones is getting really upset about the whole thing. Although I will admit, I would have been upset about it too. So. Of course, I do admit it is a stressful situation. I mean, this is as we go along, because I mean, of course, this is the first Living Dead film that George Romero makes, and then obviously, he made basically his entire career on making these films. I mean, this film, and then the next one, Dawn of the Dead, and then the next film, Day of the Dead, and then he makes some other films of the Living Dead. It's just. Then obviously, I mean, this is kind of the first step in the this is obviously the first kind of step in making in the film franchise. Oh my goodness. I think this is the scene in which No, come on. No, I will admit all this oh, yep, there's the scene in which he I think right hooks her in the face. Again, back in the day, I mean, that would have been very, I mean, obviously very controversial. I mean, of course, I mean, I think the idea, black man hitting a white woman, I mean, obviously that, but I mean, I think even nowadays, like the idea of, domestic violence, even though, I mean, these two aren't really, they're not, romantically involved. I mean, it's still controversial, in that kind of sense, so. So now as Dwayne is turning on the radio, I think one of the things I definitely should say, and I just remembered this, is George Romero actually based this film on a very famous piece of literature. It is this film is, in George Romero's mind, essentially an adaptation of the book I Am Legend, which of course has been made into countless movies. There's been a film, The Last Man on Earth, that was made based on the film. There was the Omega Man, starring Charlton Heston, that essentially was based on I Am Legend, and then of course the Will Smith film that was released about 13 years ago, called I Am Legend. So, I don't think it was essentially like, because I believe it was the whole idea of the infected people in I Am Legend that were basically preying on the uninfected people, and they were essentially, they essentially were, not. What was I trying to say there? The infected people preying on the non-infected people in I Am Legend basically was what inspired George Romero to make the, cannibalistic flesh eaters, that would later become the modern day zombie in this movie here. So essentially, I Am Legend is the another kind of cause for basically another impetus for the modern day zombie. So. No, and then Dwayne here is doing the Dwayne is doing the classic pouring lighter fluid on stuff and making and setting it on fire kind of deal. So. Although I will admit he made a pretty solid torch there. I do remember this lighting stuff on fire and kind of distracting people. I think it was actually. This reminds me of a film reminds me of the film Zathura, in which they were trying to get away from the man-eating Zorgons, and they literally had to set one of their couches on fire, and they set it, and they pushed it out of their house, and essentially caused the Zorgons to, go away. So. So yeah. So and as we're, you may not be able to, if you're watching this, you may not be able to hear it, but as Dwayne is kind of boarding up the house, and as he is essentially pushing out the couch and the fire, trying to distract the aliens, there's actually like a radio that's being broadcast kind of in the background there, and there's like radio playing in the background. I do believe that there's an actual radio announcer that's actually, doing that voice back there. I don't know exactly who it is, but again, it was kind of something that they wanted to add on to the originality or kind of the authenticity of the film. So. Of course, for me, that's actually what makes the film kind of the more scary, is kind of listening to that whole, the whole world is kind of descending into chaos, and, the whole, world is descending into an epidemic of, basically the recently dead are starting to, become undead and start, eating flesh and that kind of thing, so. And Dwayne is now tired, and he wants to sit on the couch. Oh, yeah, another controversy if this film was made nowadays. You wouldn't see, actors and actresses smoking in the film. Of course, back in the 1960s, I mean, this was, just kind of commonplace. I mean, you always had, people smoking, so. So, yeah, and just kind of listening to people talking on the radio. Dwayne's doing his thing. Just kind of going. Not a whole lot to talk about here. I should say that this film is actually produced by. It said it was an Image 10 production, but there was also another production company, the Leighton Image production company, and Hardman Associates, of which we saw in the original in the opening title cards scene there. This film, because essentially it was George Romero that basically created his own production company in order to his own kind of independent production company. He made it with several people that would be involved in this film. I mean, he made it with John Russo and Russell Streiner, Carl Hardman, who obviously was the Hardman Associates, and that and then some other key contributors as well, and then also Marilyn Eastman too, who was part of the Hardman Associates Incorporated. So So, and according to the story here, apparently the initial budget was $6,000. They were able to get, obviously a lot more to the 114,000. But basically, the original kind of pitch was that you essentially had all the main producers, Hardman, Striner, Russo, Marilyn Eastman. Basically, they all contributed about $600, and they essentially were able to raise $6,000 of their own money. And then they were able to get the final money from Image 10 Productions. So, now the thing is, basically all those producers. I mean, Russell Striner was, I think was Johnny played Johnny as Judith O'Dea's brother essentially. Yeah, Russell Striner is Johnny. Yes, and Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, as we're going to see here, they're actually the they're going to be the husband and wife couple that come up from the basement. If you notice there was kind of a scene in which they kind of pan to the basement kind of door to kind of look and see, whether or not there was something there. You kind of pan to see, oh, there's probably something in that basement there, and of course, probably freak some people out, but just know that there's some people down there. So, but again, I mean, it's people. I mean, again, this movie, it's just how low budget it is. I mean, you essentially had a majority of the main cast were essentially also like producers, and I think even Marilyn Eastman was also the more of the makeup artists and like special effects people on the film as well, because I think it was one of the main people that was able to get the mortician's wax in order to use for the zombie kind of makeup for the actors and actresses playing the zombies. So they're eating the flesh of the people that they kill. There we go. We're listening to the radio announcement here. Something's going on. What's going on? Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Now we're introduced to the basement dwellers, whereas there is Carl Hardman is the kind of the balding man with the tie, with the shirt and tie, and then the other guy Tom, played by Keith Wayne, which I do believe is his only film. Keith Wayne, I mean, the guy pictured right here for you guys watching on YouTube. I believe it's actually his only film that he's actually ever acted in. So basically what they're going on about is Dwayne is kind of accosting them for, why didn't you guys come upstairs to see if... Dwayne is like, why didn't you come up and help me out? And the Carl Hardman's character is essentially being like, wow, we were down in the basement. That's the safest place we can be. How could I know that there was... how could I know that there was a thing, and it was that kind of blah blah blah, that kind of thing. So okay, so now this is actually kind of interesting, because there's actually the little kind of debate going on between the character's name is Harry Cooper, played by Carl Hardman here, and between him and Dwayne, the debate of whether or not they should go basically barricade themselves in the cellar of the basement of the house, or essentially and essentially like Dwayne is saying, no, the cellar's a death trap, we have no way out. Harry Cooper here is basically saying that the safest place is the cellar, because you can really barricade yourself, and yada yada yada. And And essentially, I think this like whole debate whether or not they should be in the cellar or even on the top side of the house, I think, been raging for quite a while actually. For horror fans and fans of this movie. So, and it's kind of interesting because again, like they both make kind of good indicators. Of course, Carl Harmon says the Harry Cooper says is that basically saying that there's so many like ways that the ghouls can get in, or they basically say those things can get in there. And then, but also at the same time, Dwayne is right. Is that if you go down there, I mean, there's nowhere to go. So it's kind of. Yep, he even says it is a death trap. So, but who knows? Oh dear. Yeah, Mr. Cooper. He kind of reminds me of like one of the jurors from 12 Angry Men, just kind of like that old crotchety bastard kind of deal, kind of guy. So. So yeah, what else can I talk about? So yeah, this is George Romero's first directing feature that he has made actually. Of course, being in a of course obviously for a first director it's kind of like I kind of not in the same sense maybe what I'm trying to say is George Romero, one of those directors whose first films is basically turned into like basically turned into a classic. Kind of the same sense that Orson Welles' first directorial film was Citizen Kane, which has obviously been considered one of the most greatest films of all time. So, but. Again, what a way to start the film. What a way to start a filmmaking career. Obviously, it's a low budget kind of, I wouldn't say exploitation horror film. I mean, I think it would be exploitation horror, but just kind of one of those kind of things that lightning striking in a bottle kind of deals. In which it's just kind of a perfect storm of circumstances making this your first film, one of the most scariest films ever made, actually. So, some people even consider it still one of the most scariest films ever made. In fact, this film, I was reading kind of like a behind the scenes book. This film was actually one of the key contributors to Wes Craven really digging into horror himself. Of course, Wes Craven's first directorial film was the exploitation horror film, The Last House on the Left, and of course, he's obviously more famous for his films, The Nightmare on Elm Street, and the Scream franchise. So yeah, I will admit though, Carl Harmon's not an act. Carl Harmon's. I don't think he was an actor by trade here. I think he literally came out here and was gonna. I think he was just a producer that was basically an actor, kind of like a part-time actor. But I mean, he was mostly producer. But I will admit, looking at his performance here, it's. I would say honestly, it rivals that of even Dwayne Jones. Dwayne Jones I think is the best of the film, but Carl Harmon's is Harry Cooper is really, really riveting, actually. Of course, I don't really think it's that easy to play like a deranged man in a really stressful situation. But of course, it's a really good performance, and I think same with the actor. I think with all the actors. Even Judith O'Dea, who's really not really doing anything. I mean, in the film, honestly, after the first, cemetery scene. But I mean, even her like catatonic, um, her catatonic, acting is, really interesting. Now, what's actually interesting is that like Cooper here is going back into the basement, and essentially, what's really interesting about kind of the different, um, basically, what's interesting about the basement is that that is actually a completely separate set from the house that they're in right now. Um, because the basement cellar that they're in right now, this is actually completely different than the house. The house that they were filming in, was actually didn't have a basement. It was essentially a, you know, basementless house, and the cellar here was actually filmed at I do believe it was the production studio's basement, basically in Pittsburgh, where this filming was made at. So um, which also I think it explains why, of course, the two like producers, Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, the father and mother here. I think it probably makes sense because I mean it's obviously, I think it's literally their basement, so I think it would make sense for them to be filming most of their scenes in it. So, but and what's actually kind of interesting, there's actually a behind the scenes, like an event that happened in this basement here, is that I think actually some of the film elements from Night of the Living Dead were actually stored in the basement. Were actually stored in the same cellar that were actually being filmed at. There's actually they don't show it on camera, but there's actually like a section of the basement there that they can go back, and like there's like sections of like shelves where they can like house films and all that kind of stuff. And apparently one night there was a flood that actually, I think, destroyed a lot of the film elements, and because of that, a lot of the Night of the Living Dead, film elements were lost because of that. So yeah. As you can also notice in the scene here, the Cooper's daughter has been basically non-responsive, and what we don't notice, or I don't think they've explicitly told us yet, but essentially she has been bitten by one of those things. I think maybe either been bitten or like severely scratched by one of those things. And of course, obviously, for anybody that knows anything about zombies nowadays, I mean, if somebody's bitten like that, then they're obviously, then they're going to turn themselves into a zombie. Then they themselves are going to turn into a zombie. So yeah. So yeah. I do believe the original character of because I believe the younger man's name is Tom, and I think it's either his wife. I think it's a wife. It's some kind of like significant other. I'm not exactly sure if it's a wife or a girlfriend or something like that. But apparently, the character of Tom was actually supposed to be kind of an older gentleman, and I think Judy, the woman here, was going to be a younger woman from the start, but I think they decided to make Tom's character a little younger and casted, I think, Keith Wayne, because in order to kind of give them kind of that romantic kind of spell or something like that. So, and of course, the little daughter is still unresponsive. The Coopers are coming upstairs now, so yippee. I would believe that little in the house there itself, that little kind of door that's technically not going to the basement. I think it's technically going in like a little closet there or something like that. Because again, the house that we're in right now, the setting for the basically the setting for the entire movie, the actual house that they filmed in didn't have a basement in it, so. And now we have Marilyn Eastman and Judith O'Day. So yeah, again, more smoking, because that's obviously something that will be happening in a film now, in a film in the 60s, actors and actresses smoking, so. So, yeah. George, that's actually a bit of a funny. I feel like that's actually a bit of a funny like comedy moment there. He's like sees his wife like smoking. And he's like, give me that cigarettes. And he just takes them from him. So. So let me see here. I'm trying to think here because I'm trying to look up who the newscaster on the radio is. I think I know. I don't think it was that, but I was trying to see like who the newscaster is. I believe that Carl Hardman has actually portrayed some of the newscaster, some of the radio performances in some of the I think in some of the things there actually. Because one of the things I think we even noticed there is that there was a radio announcer in the car in which Johnny was turning on the radio in the car there, and and I do believe that radio announcer was Carl Hardman himself, the same guy that's playing Harry Cooper, the balding man right here. So now they have turned on a television set here, and I do believe, and now I'm not exactly sure who this is because I'm getting some kind of conflicting reports. I do believe this is either Charles Craig playing the newscaster on the radio or Bill Chili Billy Cardille. I think it's more Charles Craig, but it also could be because I'm not exactly sure here. But again, the people that were actually playing the newscasters here, I mean, these are real newscasters. I mean, and I think they even they're showing some, and they're even going to show like some like actual like towns here, and they're like referencing like actual like towns because this film is basically taking place in Pennsylvania. I mean, basically just 30 miles away from Pittsburgh. And I think one of the things that they wanted to put it in for the town, they wanted to, they were making it like, or they were referencing actual like towns and cities because they wanted it to be a lot more realistic. And now it's actually really funny, kind of when I hear about this. When I hear about this, when Night of the Living Dead was actually first shown on, television for the first time, I do believe that these television scenes right here that are being shown to us there was actually like a little like title card or like a little subtitle underneath it that said it was only a dramatization. It was like not real at all because I'm pretty sure there were some people that were were some people that were going to say that it was. I'm pretty sure that if they had actually, I'm pretty sure if they hadn't put that it's only fake, it's a dramatization kind of thing on there, I'm pretty sure they would have had a whole lot of people that would have been pulled like that World War, that they would have pulled like a War of the Worlds kind of thing, like that thing, that kind of idea where when Orson Welles did the broadcast of War of the Worlds back in 1938, and people thought that it was actually, real, that the world was that they were being invaded by like aliens and that kind of thing. So I think that's also why they have to do that nowadays, because people are just gonna think that it's real and all that kind of stuff. So. Oh, okay. I do believe that now the guy holding one of the guys holding the microphone. I do believe that's the Chili Billy Cardille kind of guy. Now I believe that the man that is playing the police officer. Okay, I think that majority of these actors in this scene right here, I believe a lot of them are basically just production assistants and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe one of them is Sheriff McClelland. I can't really, it's kind of hard to say that name. I'm reading this off of Wikipedia here. One of the mans that is playing him is George Costanza. George Costanza. I mean, I'm messing a lot of these names up, but he was, again, one of the production managers. And again, going back to the low budget, got a lot of, production assistants that basically casted themselves in the film because it was just cheaper to do that. It's just. I will think that I think the only actual film actors that are in this scene are Dwayne Jones and Judith O'Day, and I think Kira Sean, I don't even know how to say the name, who plays the little daughter, Karen Cooper, of the Coopers. I do believe that she may have been an actor, but I'm not exactly sure. But most of these other people, they're just either like real life news anchors, newscasters, or like production managers or production assistants. So again, it's just wonderful to how you how you can save a lot of money by basically just casting your crew into the film there. So. Do you have any answers? Oh my gosh. Again, all those like, all those cities and like hospitals, I do believe in the um showing on the TV there are actually like real world, like, or real, like, places and real hospitals and in Pennsylvania, which I think adds to the realism and authenticity of the film here. So. Now, I do believe, since while I was talking over, because they actually had I think they were talking about like there was some kind of like radiation from a probe around that orbited the planet Venus, and I do believe that I think that's a callback to what was one of the original story ideas, because I originally believed that the idea. One of the original ideas of the script was that there was essentially going to be aliens that visited Earth, and you basically befriended people, kind of like an E.T. before E.T. kind of vibe. And then, but that somehow got scrapped, and then it obviously, when it obviously, kind of transitioned into, like the flesh-eating, recently deceased people. So, but of course, that would be an interesting. Sorry about that interruption. So yeah, I mean the original ideas of the story. I mean, you had aliens visiting, that kind of thing, and then obviously it evolved into the I Am Legend kind of idea. So. Although I will admit that I'm watching it now, the Keith Wayne the Keith Wayne kind of performance is kind of seeming more like that kind of cheesy, like, oh, there's some stuff down in the box there. Oh, I'll go get it. So yeah. So basically, they're trying to formulate a plan in order to get. What's going on now is that Dwayne, Ben, and Harry Cooper, they're essentially trying to get a. They're trying to formulate a plan now in order to use Ben's truck in order to get to the pump and fill it up with gas in order so they can go to like one of those nearby shelters and try to escape from the house and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's just very interesting. So that was just breaking some social ground here. I mean, obviously you got a African American man essentially, leading the charge and taking leadership, from basically a whole group of white people. So, and Dwayne Jones, he was the only African American on the film there. So I think he felt. Some people say he was felt out of place, but again, I mean, but he also said that it was good working with them and that he liked working with the people. So. Aw, just a nice little tender moment with, Tom and his wife or girlfriend or whatever they are. I don't know. It's not really, made that explicit in the film, so. I will admit, I mean, the film, it kind of has, you can definitely see the low budget kind of touch on the film. I mean, you can kind of see that, yeah, this film really was basically made for pennies, but, but yeah, you can kind of see some of the low production quality, but you also can see the good filmmaking that they use with the good filmmaking kind of coming out from it because it's, I mean, it's just, I mean, they do a lot with very little in this film. I mean, they're really able to stretch their budget and really, I mean, and it's really because it's really, and they when they made with this film, they knew that we couldn't make anything big budgeted or grandiose like these other films that we grew up loving, but we can maybe go to a rural place and bring the horror to them. I think one of the things that they were doing filming, that's the reason why they were filming out in the Evans City cemetery, and the reason they were filming out in this house is just because, you didn't have to have any permits out there, and, it's just, filming out there, by yourself where, nobody would bother you, so, and plus, I mean, it didn't really cost them anything to film out there. They just drove their cars and production equipment out there and just went out and started filming and shooting and that kind of thing, so. The way a movie should be made, by the way. I mean, just go out there, find a nice little place to, make the movie and then, just film it, so. So, yeah, now they are starting to implement their plan here. This might be a little bit off topic here, but also one of the things I wanted to say was that the clothing, apparently one of the stories I heard on the clothing was that the actors and actresses are wearing in this film, essentially all the clothing is from Goodwill. It's their own. It's basically their own clothing and whatnot. I mean, it wasn't like they had a designated wardrobe department. It was just their own stuff. So, which again, I think adds again to the authenticity. I mean, you don't really need you don't need a wardrobe department or any of that kind of thing. I mean, you just need clothes. So. Again, one of the reasons I really like these low budget independent films, that sense of just what was that sense? That sense of just making a movie. It's just kind of let's put on a show, that kind of stuff, So now Mr. Cooper here, Carl Harbin's character, has Molotov cocktails, and they are throwing them he's starting to throw them out to the basically to those things. I try not to call them zombies because they didn't really call them zombies back in the day there. And then Harmon's throwing these Molotov cocktails, trying to, back them up, trying to, scare them away, that kind of thing. Of course, one of the newscasters on the radio was saying that any way that you could actually like burn these people up, or either burn them up or shoot them in the head, is almost a surefire way to, get them, away from you or to kill them, that kind of thing. So now we're seeing Tom here kind of running out to the truck, trying to start it up. Oh, man, what is Judy doing here? Then Judy is running out. Judy is running out to try and... Judy's running out to be with Tom. She's really scared and all that kind of stuff, so... Obviously, also another trope that this film created, the idea of zombies not being killed by, just being shot at. You have to actually, shoot them in the head. Either have to shoot them in the head or burn them, because, you see, you see Ben, shooting one of them, but you just see it, they shoot them, and then they just keep moving. They just keep walking, that kind of stuff, so... I also admit, I love the old-fashioned looking truck they got here. Of course, back in the day, this would have been just one of the trucks, just a truck that they had driven. It's not an old-fashioned truck, but just a truck, but looks cool to me. I also love how the lighting kind of changes and kind of flips, because you can kind of see there's some light moments, and then there's some dark moments and all that good kind of stuff, so... Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Yep. A little bit too, yeah, a little bit too, egregious with that fire there. Trying to get to that pump there, and then although I don't know why they got back into the truck, the fire follows them, and then... The truck, just a second here, the truck will explode eventually. I don't know, of course I don't know when when it exactly will explode here in the movie here, so. Nope, there we go. With a little bit too much of a big explosion, probably much of a fireball, honestly. I don't think it would have been that bad in the film there, so, or in real life, my man. So, of course, also that's just kind of going back to my nitpickiness of the film films here. So, all right, so now Dwayne is basically out there. Dwayne Jones is basically out there by himself. So now he has to run back. He's about to get cornered by all these zombies. So now he has to run away. So all that good stuff. So, oh man, there are a lot of zombies out there now. Again, they're ghouls, not zombies. They're ghouls. Actually, technically things as well. So. Yeah, very interesting. The first ever modern-day zombie movie actually doesn't really use the term zombie in it, so. I also love Cooper's, just cowardice in the whole scene here, where he doesn't let Dwayne, or doesn't let Ben in. You kind of see him in the film here. Ben gets back to the door, and Harry Cooper, Carl Hardman's character, essentially is, um, you know, essentially just looks at him. He's just too scared to open the door for him. So Ben literally has to kick the door down. And then it's finally when when they get the door shut, Carl Hardman comes out and actually helps Ben out. So you can see Ben is obviously like pissed off at him. So always horror films, always an indicator of the human condition. Who's going to be the brave one? Who's going to be the resourceful one? Who's going to be the coward? I mean, always a good, nice little study of the human condition, Oh, okay, now here we go. We're going to get to a really cool scene right here. So they are ripping out Tom and Judy, and they're starting to eat them. Obviously, they are flesh eaters. And actually, it's kind of interesting. What they're actually eating is essentially roasted ham, and apparently it's also drizzled with chocolate sauce. Now, with chocolate syrup. That was kind of one of the interesting kind of behind-the-scenes special effects that they made with this film, was that that the blood simulation that we've been seeing basically throughout the entire film. I mean, we saw it in the beginning of the film, and we're seeing it now, and then we're going to see it later in the film, is that the blood is actually simulated using Bosco's chocolate syrup. I mean, very specific type of chocolate syrup that they're using here. And then apparently the ham is, old roasted ham, and apparently they actually had like intestines and entrails that were donated by one of the crewmen, who I think was also like a local butcher, I think, or something like that. So yeah, the truck is now destroyed. Tom and Judy are now dead, and now essentially so now they're basically on their own. So yeah, they don't have any way out. So they're kind of stuck there. I could always laugh at Judith O'Dea's like acting there. It's like, it's 10 minutes to 3, 3 minutes to 10. Oh my gosh, blah blah blah. I don't know. So they actually, they're discussing, how they can get out, all that kind of stuff. So very interesting here, actually. So they're, while they are talking about their next steps here, apparently there was reading something on, again, this is on Wikipedia, I'm reading this, that one of the things that people kind of look at, kind of like in a symbol, in a symbolism kind of way, is that the zombies' victims are actually kind of like a representation of, it's like a representation of like people being like repressed by like by the establishment. Like people have stated that like the zombies like the victims themselves, it's like repressing like feminism and countercultural movements. Of course, very very prominent back in the 60s and that kind of thing. So I didn't really get. I haven't seen this film a whole lot. I mean, I think this is like the third, maybe fourth time that I've actually watched this film all the way through. But of course, it's yeah. So So yeah, not a whole lot else going on this film. I mean, we're just again we're looking at the film, looking at the newscaster here, and then again a real life newscaster. They're trying to determine what's their next steps in order to take. Oh yeah, now they're okay. So this is actually going to kind of play into the ending of the film, and you'll kind of see why in a little bit here. But essentially, what's going on is that you essentially have like a whole like group of people getting together in order to do some vigilante justice in order to kill these things. Now, I will admit, if a zombie situation had actually like arisen, then I think that this would not be the worst idea in the world, like having a vigilante crew in the world, because you're going to need a lot of people. Oh, this is Chief McClelland here. This is played by George. This is played by that production manager that I mentioned earlier, George Costanza. Again, I don't know if it's me or not, but I like the idea of the film here, the news reporting, kind of adding. For me, that's kind of the idea of the whole. It makes it even more scarier because I mean it's just just not because like you think that the film is in you kind of like you're kind of isolated in like you're this own little pocket here like with these characters and whatnot. And you're thinking that, oh, this is something that's only going on here, but like, no, this is actually something that's going on like almost everywhere here. So, to me, that actually makes it, a lot more of the terrifying. So yeah. So this is Bill Cardell right here. I didn't know who was in that. Sorry about that. They're not really, you don't really get a whole lot of, don't get a whole lot of, clarification on who's who in the news reports there. So now, as we have seen, the power has gone out at the house there. Either the zombies have wrecked I think the zombies have knocked either the power lines out, have knocked some of the power out of the house. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie. If I was in this situation, I would be being really upset. Oh, now the ghouls are trying to. Ooh, it's like they're starting to learn now. They're gonna start like banging on the door, and they're gonna start really trying to get into the house now, and they're really gonna try and start breaking their way in. I do believe that one of the ghouls that we see in this scene here is actually portrayed by, I believe his name was John Russo, who was actually one of the co-writers of the film with George Romero, and again also was one of the producers of one of the producers and one of the people that was part of the production company that him and George Romero created. So. Then you can see kind of the whole how Cooper is kind of bit of a coward, all that kind of stuff. So and also people are Cooper's also trying to get that gun. What the heck? Yeah, and Ben's just had about up to here with Cooper's antics and all that kind of stuff. So he's gonna take the gun and shoot Cooper right now. So which I love Dwayne. I love Dwayne Jones's acting here because his face is just like really just not a whole lot of motion, just really just kind of stone face on that. So Nope, they've knocked the door out. The ghouls are starting to get into the house. Watch out now. Oh, now and then George's, Harry Cooper starting to get stumbled down into the basement. Yeah, so he's stumbling there. He's just like, he's about to kind of croak it himself. It looks like. I do believe that he has died. I mean, I know that he didn't. I do believe that Cooper died. I mean, we'll see what happens to Cooper here in just a second. But now you have, the zombies. They're getting after Marilyn Eastman. Helen Cooper now. Barbara finally gets out of her little trance to finally help them out, and she's actually starting to help out now. Now we see what actually happens to the little girl, that she actually becomes a zombie herself, or a ghoul herself, and she has eaten obviously her father, and she's going after her mother here. And then grab a little mason's trowel there, and then she's going to start stabbing her mother repeatedly. Again, splattering chocolate syrup all over them in order to simulate blood, all that good stuff. Now, the little girl, Kira Shone, who's playing her, I do believe she was actually stabbing a pillow when she was going at this here. Stab, stab, stab to the pillow, and obviously splattering chocolate syrup all over here, chocolate syrup there, chocolate syrup there. We'll admit, kind of a tasty film there. Of course, not the chocolate syrup over the ham. That didn't seem very appetizing. Of course, actually, I think when they were filming that scene with the chocolate over the ham, I think they actually were like, yeah, we don't really need any makeup here, because a lot of the people were actually getting quite nauseated from eating the ham and chocolate syrup, so they were turning pale white themselves. So they were like, "Yeah, we don't really need to put any makeup on them." So now Judith O'Day has finally gotten caught, and Barbara is getting consumed by those things. So Ben is basically on his own now, and. You got the ghoul from the cemetery. I mean, you saw that Johnny was You saw that Johnny, Barbara's brother, was essentially coming in through the door as well. So you know that he's now one of those things. So now the thing that Ben said, yeah, we can't get in. We're not going to be able to do this because it's, a death trap. He's essentially going down into the cellar now in order to, escape these, things. So I will admit, in two senses, they're what they both predicted came true. Cooper thought that the upstairs. He thought that the upstairs was going to be too, vulnerable for any of those things to get in for, and obviously, as you saw, they were able to get in pretty easily. But then now Dwayne is basically trapped downstairs, and he's basically going to have nowhere else to go now, so. An interesting thing about this film, actually, you watch it here, you'd obviously would think, man, this is a film that, I would not want to show to, little children, or, you wouldn't want to have little children attend, but, one of the things, actually very interesting, kind of in the, kind of interesting in how in the timing of when the movie came out was that the movie is not rated by any of the MPAA ratings that we know nowadays, the G, PG, PG-13 ratings. This film came out quite literally 1 month before the MPAA ratings were actually put into effect. This movie was released in October of 1968, and the MPAA ratings started going into effect November of 1968. So as a result, there no restrictions on who could see this movie. So you'd have a lot of little kids, little like not I would say little kids, but I mean you'd have like a lot of like children that shouldn't be seeing this movie go in to see this movie, and they come out and they are just traumatized. I mean, they just they had no idea what they were going to see, and the thing is, like, the movie doesn't end on like a happy note. I mean, as we're going to see here in just in a second here, but the movie is they even, and George Romero and some of the distributors were trying to pressure George Romero into, putting on a more happier, as you would call it, Hollywood ending to the film. And they stuck to their guns, and they didn't want to put in a kind of a happier ending, so they kind of stuck with this kind of sadder ending. This, not a sadder ending, but this kind of tragic ending, kind of towards the end that we're gonna watch here in just a second. So now it's daytime. We're looking at the day, and we got helicopters out now. The posse is out on the countryside, shooting these things and making sure that they're all dead and that kind of thing, all that stuff. So that's actually something that'll come into play kind of in the next movie, the Dawn of the Dead movie, when the posse members out here are kind of talking, and they're saying that basically stating how what was it? In Dawn of the Dead, in the beginning of Dawn of the Dead, one of the things that was established is that people out in the countryside here, kind of like what we're seeing right now, they were having a better time of fighting the ghouls and fighting the things and whatnot. But as you got into like the urban centers, as Dawn of the Dead kind of illustrates, I mean, it was kind of they were overrun with all those zombies. So again, kind of a bit of a foreshadowing. I don't think George Romero. One of the things that George Romero says, I don't know if this is actually, I don't know how accurate this is, but they said that when they wrote this film, they actually wrote it as like kind of 3 short stories, and when they got to making the films, the short stories ended up becoming, the first story was Night of the Living Dead, the second short story was Dawn of the Dead, and then the next story was Day of the Dead. So again, I don't know how realistic or how real, I don't know how like accurate that is, but it's that. So that's actually a really interesting thing that he says, is that everything seems to be under control. However, we're going to learn, obviously, in Dawn of the Dead that that's obviously not the case. And here comes Ben, played by Dwayne Jones, coming out of his stupor in the night. Coming out of his sleepiness. And basically he's just watching I think he's hearing all those, he's hearing like the people starting to come now, so. And unfortunately, this is gonna not end up well in Dwayne's, for Dwayne, actually. So now, one interesting kind of story that happened while making this film and it actually happened the day that they quite literally finished making the film. Like, they finally put the entire finished film together. According to George Romero, the story that ended up happening is that they quite literally threw the finished film can into the trunk of their car and started driving. I think like they drove like up to New York or something like that in order to get the film shown. And while they were driving up there, that day they heard on the radio, or they heard somehow, that Martin Luther King had been shot. So this film was, that had, honestly, that, with a black leading actor, that honestly, they at the time they didn't think, while they were making the film, like, oh, it's not a big deal, and then when Martin Luther King got shot, I mean, George Romero said it is a big deal now. So and that impacted him so much that they almost changed the ending. They didn't change the ending, which I think adds to kind of it really adds to just the gloominess and the gloom tone of the film. and obviously you can kind of see the the posse members shoot Ben in the head, and because they basically mistaked him for one of those ghouls. So but when they first had the scene, and then when they were going back and they heard about Martin Luther King getting shot, part of them were thinking, man, we probably should redo this scene, because they didn't think it was such a good idea. But I mean, or obviously, and then you had people that were pressuring them to film another ending. But I like the ending because it just adds to the gloominess of the film. I mean, I don't like people getting obviously it's a movie. In real life I don't like people getting shot, that kind of thing. But I mean, for what they were going for, I mean, the film, it's a dark tone. I mean, it's and that kind of added to the whole idea of people not really knowing what to do when this film came out, because I mean, not a lot of times in films did you have essentially all of your main characters essentially dying, which happened in this film. I mean, you had basically all of your main characters that you see basically die. Unfortunately, Ben died in a kind of a tragic way, in which basically, some might argue friendly fire, some might say racist possemen, but of course it is the '60s and that kind of thing. But I don't think we'll ever know. This ending here is actually really interesting because we're seeing all these still frames of them basically throwing Ben onto the fire and throwing all the bodies onto the fire, throwing all the bodies onto this fire, and onto this this fire, and setting it all on fire and that kind of thing. So, and all these still photos were actually captured by Carl Hardman, again the man that played Mr. Cooper there, the balding grumpy man. So, and that is how the film is gonna end, on a shot of the bodies burning like that. The end. So yeah, this film came out in 1968. Obviously, when it came out, it was a smash hit right away. A lot of people it was really terrifying for them. I mean, I think a lot of people that will watch it on YouTube, I mean, if you watch the film nowadays, I mean, you're gonna you probably would think it's tame, and to be quite honest with you, it is kind of tame for a movie by today's standards. But back in the day, that was some really hardcore filmmaking that they were making there. So it was quite interesting. And obviously, I mean, the legacy of this film, can't be understated. I mean, this film is up there with films like Halloween, Psycho. I mean, movies that are basically some might even put the Blair Witch Project in for found footage horror, but I mean, this is one of the movies that were really the catalyst for the modern day zombie movie. I mean, because basically all the zombie tropes and there were zombies before this film, but it meant something completely different. I don't remember exactly what it meant before this, but I mean, the term zombie and the idea of having basically recently dead corpses coming back to life, basically reanimating and starting to basically be cannibalistic, and then starting to feast on the corpses. I don't know if it was the I'm not going to say that this film started that trend, but it definitely was the best made film that started that trend, and it ultimately, was the one that really popularized it, and made zombies into what they would be nowadays. And of course, I don't think this film would have been. Of course, I don't think zombies would have been around much more so than if Dawn of the Dead had been made. Now, I think Dawn of the Dead is actually the more quintessential zombie movie. But of course, this one is also, kind of the origin. I mean, because, you had this film before Dawn of the Dead, and I don't think Dawn of the Dead would have been around had they not made this film. So, again, this film is one of the most profitable films ever made. Actually, independent films ever made. I mean, again, the budget was only about $114,000, and they basically made $30 million when they made this film. However, George Romero didn't, and a lot of the producers didn't see a lot of the money from this film. Falling into the public domain didn't really help that situation out either. But I think I also read somewhere that the distribution deal that they had made with the Walter Reed organization was kind of a crap deal, and it kind of basically cut them a very small chunk of the money. So in that case, they didn't really make a whole lot. George Romero didn't make a lot of money off this film. It was only later when, he made, Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead that he really started to become a lot more successful as a filmmaker. And I would argue that George Romero probably made more money off of the 1990 remake of of Night of the Living Dead, which in 1990 Tom Savini, who had originally kind of gotten a rise to fame as being kind of the special effects guy, basically the guy like in charge of like all the gore effects in Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. He would go on to direct the remake of Night of the Living Dead, which essentially is, I would say it's a shot-for-shot remake. I mean, I haven't seen the remake, and I honestly don't really have any intentions of doing so. But I mean, it's essentially the same characters and essentially the same idea. Like, they're stuck in this house, and they're trying to survive the night, but versus all these things and zombies and that kind of thing. So the ending is a little bit differently. I mean, I think in the remake, Barbara actually survives, but of course in this film, I mean, they do not. So actually, no, in the remake, I mean, the spoiler alert for the remake, Dwayne ends up turning into the zombie, I think, before any of the other people do, and they have to shoot Dwayne that way. No, Ben. I keep calling him Dwayne. His name's Ben. Ben turns into a zombie, and then Barbara has to shoot him. But then also he finds out that Harry Cooper, Mr. Cooper, is still alive in the house, and that she is so upset with him that she ends up shooting him and killing him. Kind of like a nod to how Ben gets, shot off in the original one there, even though he's not technically a zombie. So and yeah, that's the remake. And I think George Romero, I think he probably made more money off of the remake than he did of this movie. So, but yeah. So yeah, that is Night of the Living Dead. A horror icon that is basically available for free for anybody to watch online. So obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you basically watch the film with me talking over it. So, but also if you're any of those that are listening at home, if you like, I mean, Night of the Living Dead is basically available for free online. I mean, you could watch it on YouTube. I mean, you can download it, basically anywhere. I would recommend buying the Criterion Collection Blu-ray. I own the Criterion Collection of the Blu-ray, and the transfer, the quality is a lot better than the film that we watched here. I mean, this film, the version that we watched on the YouTube version that we watched just now, is very, very crude and very, very like in need of some restoration. And the Night and the Blu-ray version that I own is very faithfully restored and very good looking film too. I mean, it's I was watching some of the Blu-ray version last night. It looks a lot better than the version that we watch right now. And of course, in our world of high tech and high definition, that's I think something that people like to watch. So or something that people like to have is higher quality of video and audio. So anyway, y'all, that's honestly where I'm gonna leave it for you guys. Again, thank you guys so much for watching along on YouTube, if that's what you did, or listening along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to. We are going to conclude the month of October next week with the movie Halloween, the original 1978 horror classic directed by John Carpenter and starring Jamie Lee Curtis. And I am looking very much forward to doing that commentary. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure y'all stay golden out there, and I will see you on the flip side.